Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Lion, the Way, and the War, where we talk about Jesus, his church, and the spiritual battle that surrounds us all. My name is Craig Allison, and I'll be your host. All right, welcome to the show. We've had a little bit of a hiatus. We're back. Hope everybody had a great Christmas and New Year's. I certainly did. It was good to get away and just take some time off, but we're back. We're going to be putting out some more podcasts. Listen, today, well, let me just say, over the course of my it's been about 12 years as a campus minister. I've been privileged to have a few students who made a really big impact on me and my life and my family, and so I am thrilled today to introduce you all to today's guest. I was going to say who did not have an impact at all, but you have. I say that in all seriousness. And Kelsey Hart Thrash, I knew her as Kelsey Hart, but she's since been married. She always brings out the goofiness in me for whatever reason. Anyway, Kelsey's with us today. She has received her master's degree in clinical mental health counseling from the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. That's been several years ago. She now works at Focus Treatment Centers, where she works with people struggling with all sorts of issues and has issues with their life, is what I should say. Just talking about substance abuse, eating disorders, obviously mental health issues. She is an advocate for children. Obviously, in that line of work, she advocates for children. That's, I think, a near and dear thing to her heart. Also advocates for animals, too. We may talk a little bit about that. She does a lot of care for single parents, women struggling with birth and postpartum issues. Along those lines, soon to be a doula. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
Some may not know what that is, but I may ask you that too. Been married for 4 years. Almost five. Okay. August.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if I forget to wish you a happy anniversary in August, because it's still a little bit away. Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
For 5 years. You got one child, a year and a half old.
Yep. Also August.
Also August. Yep. That's kind of how I remember the two. And so fun facts: she loves to travel.
Yes.
You love barbecue.
Amen.
And anything outdoors, pretty much. You're an outdoor kind of girl, hiking and all of that kind of stuff. Some of your friends say you've got a green thumb.
Yeah,
good
always.
Good with plants, good with fixing stuff. Outdoor stuff, especially where bovine are concerned. Any opportunity you have to kiss a cow, I hear you take that opportunity, most recently in Switzerland.
Yes. Kissing
cows in Switzerland, that's a thing, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Also loves, I wasn't even going to say this, but I guess I will. You love Florence and the Machine. And I had some respect for you, Kelsey. I really did. I had some respect for you before
just a little bit.
Before you told me that. And now I'm just so disappointed that you even said that. Now I'm not a huge follower of indie UK British rock. Never been my thing. To me, they all sound the same, including this band that you seem to like. And I will tell the listeners that when Kelsey was a student ambassador at the Student Center, her preference in music resonated with my generation, the 80s music. And you probably got that from your dad.
Yeah.
Most likely. But all the good classic stuff. So I was like, man, you are so cool. And now you threw this one at me. It's just like the weirder the band name, it's like the more people want to like it. Like when I was in college, it was Toad the Wet Sprocket, Rage Against the Machine, that kind of stuff. So if you have a weird band name, especially if you're from the UK, then I guess, they're going to get listened to.
You're a shoo-in, yeah.
So anyway, Kelsey, welcome to the show.
Hi, glad to be here.
It's good to have you. All right, so I want to talk a little bit, being a mom. How is that for you? And let me just, before I say, people need to understand that, like, when you are a campus minister and you work closely with these college students and this very pivotal time in their life, it's hard for me to like see any of y'all as parents.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of weeks ago, I think I talked to Trevor, and he's got children now, and it's just weird for me to think about you as a mom, but you are.
Yeah.
You're a mom. How's that going?
Yeah. And this is the skin I'm meant to be in for sure. Well, and too, like seeing me at the student center, I was still trying to figure myself out. Not that ever stops, but being a mom is definitely something I'm really comfortable being in that role, and I don't ever want to not be in that role now that I've experienced it. So I don't know if Daniel would say the same about...
Daniel's your husband.
Yes, Daniel's my husband. I don't know if he would ever say the same about being a parent of many children, but I want to live on a farm with as many children as there are to want me in return. So,
like Little House on the Prairie kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So, but Blair's my son. He's 1.5 years, and yeah, we love him. He's goofy. He talks a lot, which, I mean, of course, he's my son, so he's going to talk a lot.
Yeah.
He's really adventurous and has never understood the word no, and currently is telling me no most often. So that's the stage we're in with the 1.5-year-old.
Yeah. So I and I can kind of, with all the student ambassadors, you're one that stands out as far as, like if somebody were to ask me, who do you think is going to really embrace parenthood, even though it's hard for me to envision any of y'all as parents. But I would have said you, because you've always had that kind of nurturing dimension to your personality. Even back as a student ambassador, you were the person who would be like coming in my office, hey, how are you doing today? Do you need to talk about anything? Is there anything I can pray for you about? You were that person who was always really empathetic and plugged into other people where they were emotionally, which doesn't surprise me at all that you ended up being a clinical mental health counselor. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
It's a superpower for sure. I'm not sure if I have gotten to use any of those superpowers or skills with my son yet. He's definitely, he knows where the buttons are and exactly how to push them. So
your kids they figure that out really fast.
Yeah.
That's kids' superpower, is knowing the buttons for mom and dad.
Right. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's really interesting. I thought, if I never used this degree for anything else but to be a really good parent, then I'd be winning. It would be worth the debt. And haven't got to see that come to fruition yet, but I hope that I do.
Your day's coming.
Yeah.
It will come. Yeah. And the frustrating thing will be, you have this knowledge and this ability, and it's like, why is this not working on my own family?
Right. Well, because humans aren't a textbook, and thankfully so, but also makes things tricky. So
I want to get one of the primary reasons I wanted to have you on the podcast is specifically to talk. You have expertise in this area, and I haven't had any licensed clinical people here on this show podcast yet, and so I really was interested in getting your perspective from a mental health standpoint on some issues, especially as those kind of things relate to our spirituality, as they relate to the college students at that time in their life, which you've been through that, so you can appreciate and I think connect with maybe some of the things that they're going through. So I want to start that with just like a general question of like your pre-graduation from college, your pre-graduation view of the world. So before you like stepped out in the world and kind of got an idea of what was going on, your expectations of what that was going to look like versus the reality as a mom, as a married woman, as a clinical mental health counselor. Did these two worlds like collide and you're like just blown away? Was it something that you kind of expected? Yeah, this is pretty much what I thought the world was going to be like. How did that all happen?
Yeah, I would say that it definitely didn't surprise me. My parents did a really good job of just balancing and exposing us to things that they knew we would inevitably be exposed to. And so I feel like I was really prepared, to be honest. I really appreciate my parents, especially in that way, for doing that. And I was ready for it too. I've always been ready for the next step, the next jump, the next leap of faith, and whatever that looked like. And so the world didn't really surprise me. If anything, I think I did develop some, just some existential dread based on certain things that I'm now closer to, working with trauma day in and day out. It can take its toll on you, but I also think going into the world post-college experience, if you have a negative mindset, that's what you're going to find. And if you have a positive mindset, that's what you're going to find. And so I stand by that even to this day. How I view the world is heavily influenced by what lens I choose to have. And obviously there's things going on that are factual, that are out of my control, and I have to radically accept those things that are going on. And not to say that there aren't nights or weeks where I want to just like hold Blair and hold Daniel and just, cry myself to sleep based on the state of the world. Like, not to say that that doesn't happen, but I really try my best to be intentional about the lens that I wear day to day. And so, I try to make the best of that. And I look for neutrals. I look for positives, and I try not to dwell so much on the negatives in areas that I have no control over.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to talk about that for a little bit, because you're bringing up some really good points that I don't think a lot of our listeners maybe understand. We're going to talk about a little bit of family of origin, talk a little bit about, you're obviously you're going to be familiar with like genograms and stuff. So your outlook on life, I'm going to say this just based on experience. Our outlook on life is greatly influenced by our families, how we're raised. And I know enough about you and the conversations we've had to know that your mom and dad's bent, their view, their worldview, their, how they did life was probably more robust than most parents, for a variety of reasons. Parents are busy. It's a crazy world that we live in. It's a technology based world where we're just inundated constantly with screens in front of our face. Mm-hmm. And that's a real temptation, I think, for a lot of parents, especially now, to allow their kids to basically be raised by technology, by screens mm-hmm. and stuff. So they don't get that robust worldview instilled in them. So, I imagine, your family is one that's spending time outdoors, away from the technology. Mm-hmm. You're being exposed to a lot of different things, and you're given this foundational place to stand that includes a much larger perspective on life, which there in turn creates a viewpoint of the world where you can say, I choose to view this world in a positive way rather than in a negative way, mm-hmm. which then leads to all of the other stuff, how you deal with life, right? How much of that, and now you're speaking directly, I think, not necessarily to younger people, but to like my generation and older parents mm-hmm. today, parents who have an opportunity to change that paradigm. How important from a mental clinical health standpoint is it for parents to strive to be going against the ease of which technology has influenced parenting? I feel like I just jumbled a whole lot of stuff there. Yeah. Did you follow any of that at all?
Yeah, I'll go with what I think I followed, and then you can ask me again.
Because you're trained to be a good listener.
Yeah, but today's my off day, remember?
Oh, yeah, sorry, okay.
So I'll start off by saying my parents, again, did a really good job with prioritizing anything that was coming up for me. And I don't want to speak for my brother, but I believe the same for my brother as well. Mm-hmm. They did not have any topics that were off limits. And I say that as it pertains to this because I think that is where we can all be growing mm-hmm. and shifting and doing that a little bit differently, not having topics that are off limits, because we can't be doing that while simultaneously trying to encourage curiosity and asking questions. And my parents did that really well. So I feel very fortunate that that was my experience, because it's just continued a life of me, being why, being curious.
Yeah.
And it's helped in this profession, obviously, too, being curious with my clients and with anybody I come across. And so for parents out there, for, like you said, people of your generation, trying to lean more in the direction of openness and curiosity, and when it, as it pertains to social media and technology, I think it's just being curious about why. Like, why does Instagram, why do you want that to be a part of your day to day? What are you getting from it? What is it allowing you? What is it providing you versus what it's taking away from you? And is that worth it? Is it worth it to you? Because we all, I would argue that connection is a basic need. And that's been shown by by people in my own life, by my, through my own experience. And so when we think about social media and technology, it's all at its core a way to connect. Because, you think about every time you watch a show and then someone else has seen that same show, it's a way to connect. Mm-hmm. When you share pictures of, I went to that place 10 years ago, you went 5 years ago, let's compare. Yeah. It's a way to connect. So I would argue that connection and curiosity really are at the basics of it. And in my experience working with others, some people are willing to give up basic needs, or traditional basic needs such as food, water, and shelter for connection instead. And so, again, that comes back to curiosity, because if you don't have people you can be curious with, then you're already cutting off connection. And so as a parent, speaking to that generation, speaking to your generation, I think that is the difference between raising adults who are more like me, and curious and open, and try to carry that lens of positive, like trying to find the little glimmers or glimpses of hope in the world, and the people who may not have that as naturally, who have to kind of over time be more intentional with rewiring their brains to think more that way.
Okay, so
I don't know if that answered your question.
It answered it, but it also opened up a whole lot of other questions.
Okay.
My generation obviously did not have the technology that we have today. Mm-hmm. And so being curious about your kid, about your children, I'm speaking in really general terms here, but for the most part, it was easier, I guess, or more accessible to be curious about your kids, because it's like, you come home, you don't have Netflix to veg out to. You don't have, just all the stuff that is a distraction that maybe gets in the way of that family unit where you've got mom and dad connecting with the children, okay, in those important ways, and being curious about their kids. Hey, how'd your day go and stuff. And so a lot of the time for my generation, if you had that traditional paradigm family, it was expected you sit down around the family table and you process the day. You have that relational connection with one another. Now, maybe a more accurate picture looks like kids have gone to school, they come home, they're doing homework, they're doing all these different school activities. Mom and dad come home, they get dinner, maybe thrown together pretty quickly. They're exhausted, they're tired. Dad goes off in this direction, mom goes off in this direction. The kids are in their rooms separated. And you have that over and over and over again. And the next thing you know, your kids are grown, and they're entering a world that is just set up for disconnect rather than connection with human beings. Does that, you follow?
Yeah. And I think, continuing to pursue. I know that you pursue your kids. You still live with some of your kids. Just continuing to pursue them. And acknowledging, oh my goodness, acknowledging and taking responsibility for maybe things that in hindsight could have been done differently. And I don't mean, bashing yourself to your kids. I just mean just saying, hey, I recognize that even though I did the best I could, there were some things I could have done differently. And I'd love to, have a conversation with you about that and continuing to pursue them. My mom, we play phone tag to this day, 2 or 3 days a week, trying to get a hold of each other just on our way home. Instead of just dissociating, listening to whatever music I need to get through my 30-minute, 20-minute drive. I call her, she calls me and does the same. And so we continue to pursue each other. And same with my dad. We don't necessarily talk on the phone, but we have other avenues of connection. So I think it's continuing to pursue, even, if you're middle to later years and your kids are grown, that door doesn't have to be closed.
Right.
And 2, we had that growing up. You come together at the dinner table because somebody took the time to make that meal. So let's all engage in that communion and community together. And it doesn't have to look any certain way. Sometimes it would be at the table. Sometimes it would be on the couch with like taco seasoning and taco meat and like Fritos. So Frito pie or whatever. Yeah. And that's what we did.
The important thing is you're spending time together as a
right,
family unit. Yeah.
Before we check out for the day and relax, because that is important.
Yeah.
And it is important to be able to coexist with the people that you're connecting with and not feeling like every day there's this job or there's this person that you have to report to when you've done that all day at school, work, whatever. And so we definitely had that connection, and we also still had fun, and we loved watching movies. That was a way for us to connect, was watching movies, but we also didn't spend all day, every day inside. And, just finding that balance and being open to hearing what, your spouse or your kids has to say about what that may look like.
Is it the isolation from a mental health standpoint? Is it the isolation that causes concern that you see? Because again, you just said you guys as a family enjoyed watching movies together. So you may not be talking, but you're spending that time. You're in each other's presence, right? And today, I may be off base on this, but I don't know how often anything like that really happens. If that's the pervasive, if that's the norm, or if the norm is isolation, where kids get home from school, mom and dad get home from work or whatever, and they're all in their separate places. Especially early on, in the earlier years where you've got kids still living at home, and that's the picture that's taking place. How does that impact their outgoing? Again, we're going all the way back now to the first question, which was when you left college, was the world like you expected? And you shared with me, well, based on my upbringing, I had a positive outlook on how it should look. So, you didn't have that huge cognitive dissonance that occurs, right? So, is that something from a mental health standpoint that you are seeing in your practice, that isolation is creating issues for young people today?
Absolutely. And I hate talking about COVID. I feel like they're over talking about COVID, right? And I don't want to disregard or invalidate the huge impact that it did have on some more than others. But we have seen, or I have seen, I'll speak for myself, not for my place of work or my coworkers, but COVID has promoted isolation. It has promoted so much more social anxiety. And then you have just the changing things in the world from a cultural standpoint, and just this confusion on how to even show up. So if
what do you mean show up?
Just not even knowing how to show up in a space without feeling uncomfortable or feeling like you're going to say something wrong or say something that's going to offend someone else. I hear a lot of time from my clients just how immobilizing it can be to not feel like you can go anywhere without having a filter, or offending someone, because we're in this age of boundaries, respect,
hypersensitivity, maybe?
Hypersensitivity. And I think having mental health be something that's being talked about more is amazing, and it's beautiful. And it can be used for harm too. And so, what I mean by that is, for example, boundaries. Boundaries are used when you want to create a safe environment and a safe space, physically, emotionally, all the above. And so you can take a boundary and set it with someone that you care about, or someone that maybe isn't going to be, doesn't need to be a part of your life. And that's meant to, serve you and or serve the other person. But in some ways, boundaries can be used to push people away, or boundaries can be seen as something to create distance. And how I view boundaries is that it's something that you set because you want to maintain a relationship with someone. So if I were to come to you and say, hey, I have a boundary that on this podcast, we don't talk about X topic or whatever, because it's not really my topic to discuss, it's someone else's, then, that makes it to where I can feel safe coming on this podcast with you. Mm-hmm. That's not meant to push you away, but I think that's how it can be misused. Why set a boundary with someone if you don't care about them and you don't want them in your life, right?
Right.
But I think there's misunderstandings about that. And don't get me wrong, there is a time and place to set boundaries where, it is very black and white, but that doesn't mean that all boundaries need to be.
Yeah. Well, you gave me no boundaries for this podcast.
Yeah. I know. I realize that. I realize that now.
But
I'm an open book, so it really doesn't matter.
Do you feel safe? Do you feel safe here or unsafe? Is this a safe place for you?
My sandals are off and I'm sitting crisscross.
I saw that. So. I'm like, okay, make yourself comfortable. I like that. You're the first guest that has actually kicked up and relaxed, and that's a beautiful thing. Yeah. Okay, so I'm moving all of this in a direction. I don't know if you've picked up on that. I'm moving all of this in a direction to talk about, the connection, the interconnections between faith-based spirituality, okay, versus what seems to be a mental health crisis, especially among young girls, teenagers, through the college years. I literally today was talking to a college female about the negative impact of social media. And it was really difficult for her to explain, what is the pull there? And we were talking about, just the impact it has on anxiety levels and like fitting in and being seen as good enough. Okay, so all of these things that are going on. And she was even able to make a statement. She's like, I know that it's not real. I know that, the pictures, the images, all the stuff that comes across, like that's a manufactured look, but I still can't help but to compare and go, I wish I looked like that. I wish I could do that. I wish I was in that place. I wish I, and she's basically it's there all the time in front of you. So even if you have like a healthy outlook, like you're basically a mentally healthy person, okay, you're still in that culture, in the university setting. I mean, unless you're living under a rock, you're going to be just constantly bombarded with that. So, we were talking about depression and anxiety going off the charts
Right.
And it happened. We saw that increase. Researchers saw that increase in 2004, where you look at it and you're like, okay, so it's trending basically anxiety and level, suicide, all of these, it's basically kind of the same. And then 2004 hits, and it's almost like a vertical ascent in that age group, and that, with females. And I'm like, what happened in 2004? What happened? Like, why 2004?
Mm-hmm.
That's when this was invented. So now the access to that constant, social media, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, all the stuff that's now in our lives on a daily basis, is there a nonstop to see that. So all of that to say, from your standpoint, what is the way we should approach that as the church? Okay, big umbrella there, the church, because we're faced with it too. Church leaders, elders, deacons, ministers, lay counselors are faced with this issue right now, and we need to respond in some way. And since you deal with this on a daily basis, are there things that we're doing right or doing wrong, or we need to stop doing, or we need to start doing? Just feel free to word vomit.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts. The first one is shaming. We can't shame people shame is not an avenue of change, connection. Shame is an avenue of isolation. And so if we are wanting to infiltrate social media or use it for good or use it for advocacy or whatever it is, if through that we are shaming anybody, we are creating isolation and exclusivity.
Okay, wait.
Exclusivity.
I may be misunderstanding you here. So how, through not through advocacy, using social media to advocate for good stuff, how are we shaming? What is?
Sorry. So when talking about social media and how we as Christians want to utilize it, my first thought is not shaming people for being involved with it.
Okay, gotcha. You shouldn't be on social media because you're a Christian.
Right. Obviously, everyone's entitled to their opinion, but it's also part of our culture now. And so if you are wanting to come alongside someone in their journey, shaming them right out of the gate for how they choose to connect with others is going to lead to isolation immediately. And so I say that to kind of promote an avenue of openness and, again, curiosity, rather than, well, I don't use social media because X, Y, and Z, before you've even had a chance to hear someone else's reasons. Because, again, we use it for connection. We use it to feel seen, to feel soothed. I'm kind of using counselor jargon now, but if we think about it in terms of being seen, soothed, safe, and secure. So the 4 S's. We all need that. We all need to feel seen and validated. We all need to feel soothed. We all need to feel physically and emotionally safe in order to connect. And connection helps us feel secure within ourselves, within our place in the world, within our different relationship dynamics. And so if you think about it in terms of those 4 S's, being curious about, okay, so when you're scrolling, is this just, you dissociating and you just, it's more of a habit or a tick that you have with your thumb that you just scroll. Mm-hmm. Is it a way to disconnect, or is it a way for you to feel validated and seen by others because maybe you don't feel seen in your personal life or with your own dynamics that you have going on in your life? Or is it to feel soothed? I personally use social media for comedic purposes, and I love connecting with others through laughing. And so for me, oftentimes, if I find myself on social media, it's to feel soothed. Mm-hmm. It's to laugh and connect in that way. and to uplift my spirits if I'm just having a particularly hard day.
So where does that, we talk about that, and I'm tracking pretty well with you on that, but where does the instrument of our soothing cross the line to become a mental health issue that now it's gone past the point? I'll give you an example. I was driving down the interstate one time, and there was a grown couple on a motorcycle. He was driving, she was behind, leaning against his back, asleep, sucking her thumb, and not holding on. She was, literally sucking her thumb. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering, if he swerved or hit a hole or whatever, she, her soothing, okay, mm-hmm. her soothing would be perilous to her, mm-hmm. because she was soothing in a place that was not appropriate. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if, how do we differentiate as people who want to care for a person's mental, spiritual, physical well-being? Mm-hmm. How are we able to differentiate when the very source of a need to soothe mm-hmm. begins to interfere with their life to the point that it's creating anxiety and depression and thoughts of suicide?
Right. And so that comes back to balance, right? So any good thing can become unhelpful or unhealthy without balance.
Yeah.
Right. And that's with anything. It's a spectrum. And so when it comes to what you're talking about, I think, again, being curious, asking questions, and the more that we can develop that kind of conversation from the get-go, mm-hmm. the more that people will start to use their own insights and their own critical thinking skills. Because when I'm working with a client, I am taking on the belief that they have what they need inside of them. They are in the driver's seat. Yeah. I'm in the passenger seat saying, hey, I'm recognizing this. I'm noticing this. Right. Or you say that you come into my office and you're sharing with me all these vulnerable things and telling me what you want out of life. Yet when I just saw you interacting with your peers, because I work in residential, so they live there. Yeah. This is how I saw you engage. And that is directly contradictory to what you just said, you wanted your life or your connections and interactions to look like. And so I'm coming alongside them. I'm reflecting what I see. Mm-hmm. And that I'm not just reflecting what I see but based on one instance, right? It's a pattern. Right. We're all going to have bad days. Right. We're all going to have times where we act out of our values, outside of our values. And so reflecting, back to someone, maybe some incongruencies, or, hey, I've noticed this pattern and I'm curious about it, or I'd like to talk to you about it. And then, if I have the assumption that everyone has what they need inside of them and I'm just helping them find those things within themselves, then I have to also assume that they can be responsible.
Okay, so I love this right now because this is a very biblical principle. Mm-hmm. What you are describing is talked about in the Bible, where you respect a person's autonomy, right?
Exactly. Yes, 100%.
Yes, you respect a person's autonomy because they are an autonomous person. You don't want to take that away from them. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, you're going to walk beside them mm-hmm. and advocate for them mm-hmm. and encourage them and take sometimes the hard, uncomfortable, awkward step of saying, hey, you're presenting a contradictory thing. What you're telling me you want versus how you're acting don't go together. Mm-hmm. And so that's a very scriptural, biblical concept mm-hmm. as brothers and sisters that we are to walk beside one another and have that relational dynamic, right? Mm-hmm. Respecting each other's autonomy, obviously, but when one person is beginning to fall away, to do things that we know are harmful to them, we don't just continue to walk beside them and say, I love you so much, and not correct, mm-hmm. not offer, the biblical term would be like to rebuke them, okay? Mm-hmm. To say, hey man, look, what you're doing is bad for you. Mm-hmm. I love you enough to say something to you and to help you out. So it sounds like to me from a mental health perspective, you're describing something that's very biblical in nature.
Yeah. And I think of it in terms of people that I've met who aren't ready to, or they don't feel like it's their decision to know Jesus. Am I going to leave them? No, that's not what I'm called to do. Mm-hmm. Am I going to walk alongside them and be there for when they're ready? Absolutely. Whether that means 3 years from now and we haven't talked since and they're reaching out, I'll be available. That's also another good example of setting boundaries. If you're walking along someone in their journey and they're walking with you and they start to engage in behaviors or in a lifestyle that you don't believe is in line with your values and your beliefs, that doesn't mean that you have to cut them out of your life. It means you can set some boundaries. Mm-hmm. And that would be an appropriate way to use that, because it allows you to still maintain that connection and that relationship, through whatever avenue you feel called to do.
Yeah.
Without saying, oh, you're struggling. That doesn't really work for me.
Right.
And so I take that and I use that in the therapy space. I'm curious. I ask questions. I provide insights and, research or facts or, just guidance in that regard, while also letting my clients know this is your decision. If you don't want this, if you're not ready for this, I would be curious about that. Yeah. And so let's be curious. If you're open to being curious with me, I'd love to be curious with you and I'd love to explore this, but I'm also not going to sit in a space that you don't want to be in, because then we're both just going to be really frustrated at each other rather than being frustrated at the eating disorder.
I don't think a lot of people recognize the fact that, a lot of the research that's been done around mental health counseling and, the clinical approach in a lot of ways mirrors our approach to our spiritual life or Christianity. God is the same way. He's like, you have free will. Mm-hmm. I can't make you. Or he could make us, but then free will goes out the window, right? But right. We are agents, free will agents to make bad decisions. Mm-hmm. And if we choose not to do right, if we choose to live a lifestyle that is contrary to what he knows is good for us, he's going to give us the space to do that. So
because nobody wants to have a connection with a robot.
Yeah.
I don't think God wants that either.
But the other piece of this, Kelsey, is that, a lot of the things you're talking about requires us to be compassionate human beings, to truly care, to be empathetic towards people, mm-hmm. and to understand and be grieved when they're hurting, to be mm-hmm. joyful when in their success. And mm-hmm. as the church in the 21st century, I think we, again, speaking in very general terms, a lot of us have lost sight of that skill set. Mm-hmm. And it's good to be reminded that that's what we're called to be, that we're all called to be clinical mental health counselors mm-hmm. in regards to that.
I got into that because when I sat down and I really thought about my talents and the attributes that I felt that I was born with, that God gave me, and even if I wasn't born with them, just things that he helped develop in me over time, the basic requirements of a counselor, the connection with the person that you're sitting across the room from. Mm-hmm. That's why I got into that, because that's where compassion lives. That's where love lives. And at the end of the day, when I don't feel like I'm smart enough to be in a room with a patient, when I don't feel like I am worthy enough to be in the room with a patient, why did they choose me? Why? What do they think I can do to help them? Mm-hmm. I think about those things, because those things can't be taken away from me. Those attributes, those qualities, those skills, they can't be taken away.
I found in ministry a lot of times it's not about having any answers at all. It's just about listening, because I think a lot of people they don't get heard anymore. Mm-hmm. And it leads to isolation. It's like nobody's even listening to me. Mm-hmm. And just caring enough about a person to sit down and say, you have my full attention. Just talk. Just talk to me. Let me listen to you and let me hear you.
And that's really vulnerable. And that's not something that families, specifically talking about parents, have provided. For whatever reason, and I can have compassion for the parents who tried their best and maybe were just working so much to provide for their families that they weren't able to be there emotionally. So I'm definitely not, bashing or speaking negatively about that. I think that's a privilege that I've had, is that my parents were able to find a good work-life balance.
Yeah.
And I know that I'm privileged in that. And I'm not without my own mental health issues. So I'm not saying that my experience or that my parents, that our whole family unit was perfect by any means, but I do acknowledge that we were privileged and that my parents were able to, take the skills that they had learned from their parents about working and work-life balance and even tweak it to make it even better for me and my sibling.
Yeah. As Christians trying to model Christ, I think one of the key learnings for me was coming to an understanding that there's nobody in this world that is 100% mentally stable.
Mm-hmm.
That's a spectrum. You're a little crazy or you're a lot crazy, or somewhere in between.
Mm-hmm.
And I think once you realize that, it opens up a door to be more understanding and compassionate towards other people who may be one way or the other on that spectrum, as opposed to where you are at. And I think we all have, especially people of Christ, that we are called to be able to understand that and care enough about people to walk alongside of them and to try to better ourselves, to try to understand ourselves and have more self-awareness. And by that, we begin to be able to understand other people. And I think really what it comes down to is being able then to model Christ for people. All right, so I'm going to shift gears real quick, and then we're going to close out. What do you see as the biggest health crisis right now within? I want to focus specifically towards the emphasis of this podcast, which is primarily for the college age kids. Think about it in terms of if you could sit down with college females and identify what's the biggest risk factors to them from a mental health standpoint. What are you going to say to them? What are you going to warn them of? What are you going to encourage them to do or not do?
My first thought is that it's okay to prioritize yourself. And being a Christian, being someone who's advocating for Christ all the time in everything that we do, it's not necessarily encouraged to prioritize yourself by any means. And so I think taking time to do things for yourself as someone who feels driven to constantly be doing things for others, making sure that you're still finding ways to care for yourself. And I don't necessarily even mean typical ways of self-care, because self-care doesn't always look like, getting a massage or taking a bath, right? Like for me, that's the opposite of self-care. For me, self-care looks like doing something that I've been putting off, knowing that it's going to pay off for me in the long run. And so having a difficult conversation, being vulnerable with yourself, sitting with yourself, and not necessarily feeling like there has to be someone else in the room to validate your experience. You can validate your own experience by allowing yourself to sit in it and not shame yourself. And so that's what I would encourage. And then to follow that up, numbing out. Numbing is, to me, a crisis, to numb out. Not to say that we don't all need times to just turn our brains off. I'm not speaking to that. I'm speaking in terms of doom scrolling. That's numbing out.
Now you're going to have to, because there's people listening here that have no idea what numbing out or doom scrolling is.
Okay. not that it's really, I'm just using my own experience, but, just scrolling out of habit and, or while you're using the restroom or sitting in the car waiting for an appointment or something, and you're just scrolling, and before you know it, it's been 30 minutes or it's been an hour. And you're like, man, I really could have spent my time doing something not even productive, but something that was more meaningful.
Is that okay? I'm not trying to interrupt, but this is bringing up, and again, we're running out of time. We're definitely gonna have to have you back, and talk about. Are we getting to a place where we can throw the word addiction on, scrolling when you lose track of time?
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's like just like going back to like soothing and those the 4 S's, right?
Right.
If you've lost track of time and you're like, oh man, I've been on the phone for 2 hours scrolling.
Mm-hmm.
How is that healthy? Like how does that benefit a person?
In my experience, it doesn't. And
again, not to shame anybody for doing that, but I think
we all do it.
We need to bring attention to that at some point, especially. Again, going back to the concepts of walking along beside somebody, respecting their autonomy, but again, pointing out, hey, this is not healthy for you long term.
Right. Yeah, and I think coming from a place of love and compassion, and not even saying, hey, stop doing that. And Daniel has helped me with this because there are points where, I'm a little bit more aggressive in terms of, can you just get off your phone? And not just with Daniel, people in general. And so I've had to practice reframing it, saying, I would really like to spend more time with you, mm-hmm. and not using that attacking language or that shaming language, that he's just done something bad when that's not the case. But, paying attention to your own behavior patterns. And that's easier said than done. And if you have enough conscious awareness to say, oh my goodness, I spent 2 hours doing that. And if you notice that's becoming a pattern, that is you intentionally engaging in something that's not helpful for you.
Are there techniques to teach people, at least to bring the awareness to that and say, hey, these are patterns that can be dangerous? And I'm looking at this from a campus ministry standpoint, that are these conversations that we need to have from time to time, or bring a person like you in to talk to our girls, mm-hmm. and say, hey, from a training standpoint, because I don't think they get that. I don't think that they're going to their professors are saying, hey, let me tell you about the mental health issues that come with scrolling for 2 hours or 3 hours, or anything along those lines. I think it's just an accepted part of our society right now.
Right. Yeah. I will say for me, and I'll even suggest this to, I don't give advice to my clients, but I'll make suggestions, just practical stuff, if they ask. And so I've done this, and I've shared it with my clients before. I have 30-minute timers on both Facebook and Instagram. And
you personally do, or mm-hmm. You're saying you guys should do this?
All of the above. I do it. I tell my clients to do it if they're open to it. And I think it's good for anyone. If you're not even sure how much time you spend, you can, first of all, you can go into the apps and see how much time a day or a week or a month that you've been spending on social media. For me, it was somewhere around an hour to 2 hours a day. And so I just put a 30-minute timer on both, and it pops up, and it even asks me, you want to get off social media or get off whatever app, or do you want to stay on for, snooze it for 10 more minutes? And I get to choose. So that is me taking responsibility and utilizing my autonomy to say, okay, maybe I'm doing research on social media. So I do need some more time.
Right.
But most of the time when it says, it's been 30 minutes, I'm like, oh gosh, I don't even know if I really would have wanted to spend a full 30 minutes on that, but it's a lot better than it used to be. So, I take the win and I get off, but I've found that it's really helpful, and I can be so much more present. I mean, with a kid, I have a rule, like if I'm with my son, I don't have my phone unless I'm getting ready to meet someone, or I have something scheduled during that time, or really special circumstances. Maybe he's eating and,
So we need to do a better job, not only setting boundaries with other people, but setting boundaries with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
And that's hard to do if you're doing it by yourself.
Yeah.
It's hard to do in general, but much less, if you don't have anyone to kind of partner with you. Because I work with a lot of clients who they're going back to an environment that's not going to change. And so if they're evolving and going back into an environment that's not going to evolve and grow, I just want to acknowledge that can be really hard.
Yeah. Gotcha.
But you can at least be happier with yourself knowing that making those small decisions throughout your day or small changes can be much more in line with your values.
Right.
And when you're living out of your own values, you're going to naturally have more confidence in what you're doing.
Sure. Yeah. Man, I hate we're out of time. Definitely, we're gonna. I think there's so many different avenues here that need to be explored from a Christian perspective and how that overlaps with mental health today. I think that there's a lot of people out there that would be excited and maybe even have opportunity for people to send in some questions and we talk about that stuff. So probably, you and I need to get together at some point and talk about what that might look like.
Yeah.
That would be a really interesting. I want to talk about, what it means to be curious. I want self-aware, setting boundaries, all of those things that you deal with from a mental health standpoint and how that relates to Christianity. All right, folks. So we are out of time. And I'd just like to encourage you, if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, to go ahead and do that. You can see these podcasts, the visual component of it. Keep listening, though. Like and subscribe to our channel. If you're interested in ever sponsoring an episode, feel free to reach out to us, and we'd love to have you as a sponsor. Today's sponsor is Central Church of Christ at 400 Vine Street. Big announcement as we close out the show. I am transitioning out of campus ministry after 12 years and will be the new pulpit minister at Central Church of Christ. I'd love to have you come and worship with us. We've got a lot of exciting things, a lot of new ministries and programs that are going to be taking place this year. So feel free to come back. Kelsey, you've got a favorite verse, and I always like to close out the show reading a verse of the Bible. I'm going to give you the honor of sharing your favorite Bible verse with us, and we'll close out, guys. Until next time, our next episode of The Lion, the Way, and the War. Be good to each other. Be kind. Remember that Jesus Christ, the Son of God, came and died for you specifically. He loves you that much. All right, Kelsey, close us out, please.
All right. My favorite verse is Ephesians 5:19. Sing and make music in your heart to the Lord.
Great. Thanks for listening, folks.
Bye.